All right, everybody, we're going to get started here with our session with Tim Unruh from the National Association for Energy Service Companies. And we're going to talk a little bit about how you can save some money through ESCOs for your districts and for your buildings. So thanks again for joining us. And we're going to first start out with Tim. Welcome. I know you had a session earlier this morning and it was a good session from what I hear. First, tell us a little bit about yourself and what NAESCO does.
Well, I'll start with NAESCO. NAESCO is a national trade association of energy service companies. An energy service company is a company that does work in a building to renovate it, to save dollars of operating costs, energy costs, in order to use those costs to pay for the implementation that they do over a period of years. My background is I'm an electrical engineer. I've got a doctorate in electrical engineering from good old Wichita State University, who didn't make the playoffs this year. Unfortunately, not part of March Madness like they usually are. But we had Wichita State. I got my doctorate there, and then I went to work for an energy service company. And I worked for an energy service company for 12 years out of Kansas City, doing energy retrofits of buildings. I left that and went to the federal government and ran a program called the Federal Energy Management Program, which does energy retrofits for the federal buildings in the same program. And then I left that to come to NAESCO. I've been here about 6.5 years now.
Okay. Thanks, Tim. So I think ESCO is one of those phrases that a lot of facility managers and people in facilities maybe have heard a little bit about, but maybe some don't particularly possibly understand exactly what it is. Yeah. You could tell maybe a little bit about what an ESCO is and who's involved in that process.
Yeah, I gave a little hint of what an ESCO does in my introduction, but an energy service company is really a group that comes in and partners with a facility to figure out what they can do to improve the facility and make savings occur. And what's different about the work that they do versus maybe, say, a traditional design build contractor is that the scope generally is not known. So you don't have an idea what you want to do, you just know you want to save. And so from an uncertain scope, the energy service company has to come in and develop a scope that they can implement, make something happen. So they'll come in and they'll audit the facility, find out what can happen and present that to the owner, and the owner then will work together with the energy service company to refine what they think the scope is. That scope then is what becomes the implementation project. Once they agree on that, they go through a further development process called an investment grade audit. And that's kind of the premier product that an ESCO has, is this investment grade audit, because it is a proposal that has a firm fixed price combined with a fixed guarantee amount that they will of energy savings that they will guarantee will occur. And then that project then moves on to construction, and then it goes on to performance management, where the ESCO continues to work with the client to ensure that the energy and operation savings occur. And if they have a shortfall, the energy service company has to make up the difference.
Can you give us an example or two of what one of these relationships would look like?
Yeah, so when you do traditional process, many times you're doing a low bid selection. So you're trying to pick what is maybe the best evaluated quality or whatever it may be, but it often comes down to price. When you're working with an energy service company, you tend not to have to focus on price so much, because you have a requirement to have a price that works, but also a performance that works. And that's probably what's key in the difference is there's much more of a partnership in the relationship because of that piece that you're investing in a facility for something that's going to be there for 10, 20 years, and you both have to ensure that it's going to run. Traditional construction processes, often it's installed, and once it's installed, it's yours. And you're responsible from that point on. In an energy service company project, there's a partnership that goes on for many years, potentially 2 decades.
What are some of the more popular components and systems that are associated with these projects?
Well, I have to tell you, there's a whole array of things that are done in the building. And as soon as we make a list, there'll be something else that we forgot that they've added into it, what you can do in a building. But the premier thing that was done in buildings was lighting retrofits. That's where the industry got its foundation. And that's where it started years ago, back in the 80s, when this industry was born. Lighting had a huge amount of savings. You could come in and retrofit lighting in a very simple fashion and save a lot of energy. I'm quite shocked. Here in the building we're in today, we have so much HID lighting. I don't know what's inside those fixtures, but it looks like it probably is maybe HID. It could probably be retrofitted to something with LED and save a tremendous amount of energy here. And so that drove the industry initially from its founding. After that, we really transitioned more to whole buildings with control systems, major central point pieces of equipment like boilers and chillers, rooftop units. We've expanded into building envelopes, so your doors, windows, roofs, and so forth. It's gone into water systems, so you do water savings, toilets, sinks, but also irrigation, and could even include landscaping. Renewable energy has become a part of many projects. Many of our members say that renewable energy, maybe small, maybe large, is a part of every project. Not utility scale, but smaller things. There's backup generation. There's peak shaving that gets put in. The list is pretty long of what all we do.
Sure. How have these agreements changed over the years, or have they changed at all? I mean, I guess you kind of referred to it a little bit as technology evolves and new systems and things evolve.
Yeah.
The agreements evolve.
Yeah, so the agreements have changed over the years. Frankly, I think in the very beginning, it was kind of a Wild West. There weren't rules. It was new, and people were kind of doing things that probably today would not pass muster. Out of all that Wild West, NAESCO developed an accreditation program to accredit energy service companies. And the reason that's important is that provides a structure and a repeatability that if I buy from one accredited ESCO, I can buy from another, and someone can buy from yet a third, and you'll get a repeatable product that you have performance that you can count on. That's part of what accreditation does, is it brings stability to the market. It brings an understanding and confidence of the client to know that they have chosen the right entity to go forward with. But the contracts have also changed over the years in that we've gotten more formal. Every state now has laws established to allow the procurement and purchase of an energy savings performance contract at public buildings, which allows for a trade-off of the savings to be traded off for an investment, and they can pay that savings back to the energy service company to pay back that loan. We see further changes happening as the market gets more mature, and that the contracts are morphing from a traditional energy savings performance contract, which is based on savings, to even an ownership where a lot of the risk and assets values are owned by a third party and managed by that third party for the client for a fee.
If you're into this and if you're stands here or crowd and you're listening to this and things and you're interested in it, what are some of the first steps that the facility manager or the facility would take to embark on a contract?
Well, the first thing to do is obviously would be find an ESCO and talk to one. You'll find a lot of the facilities may have companies that have ESCO branches working in their facilities now. Many control manufacturers have an ESCO branch. Sometimes their mechanical contractor may have contacts with an ESCO. Or you can go to my website and find any of the names there and just start contacting from that list. The key is not that the first one you talk to is who you have to do business with, but there's a whole education process that has to occur. We recognize as our industry that it is not a normal procurement process, and it's not one that you may have used before. And if you're in a facility a long period of time, you may only do one performance contract in your life. And so we recognize that, and we realize that there's a big training process that has to occur and a development has to occur. And so any ESCO you talk to will begin to help you understand the laws that you work under, the process you have to follow, and how the overall results will be perceived by you. So you have a big picture of that. Once you've understood that, you can then go through whatever procurement process you require. Every state has a different process than what they want to have you do.
And again, it's a process that's kind of tailor-made or fit to however you want to see it fit. I mean, it seems like there are facilities that they're going to want to help third party. They're going to want maybe just advising and consulting one way. If you can kind of set these up the way it makes you...
Any way you want to set it up, you can set it up. So if you want the ESCO to play a big part in your operation of your facility, you can include them for that. If you want them to play a minuscule part, you want them in and out, you can do that. Usually there's a middle ground that's what's most often selected, but you're right. From the contractors used to the equipment that's put in to the process you follow to the time frame you follow, it all is customizable by the client.
What certain facilities do you see, Tim, that are pretty popular in the ESCO area? Is it school districts, healthcare facilities, things like that? Where do you see and where do you maybe see some growth in the area?
So 90 to 95% of all the ESCO work today is at public buildings, and that's K through 12 schools, federal buildings, state buildings, city buildings, county buildings, universities, hospitals. Those are the primary market that we serve today. And the biggest market is K through 12 schools. They have a huge need with like $82 billion of deferred maintenance. There's a lot of need those schools have.
Let's kind of get near the end, but with funding challenge is always a concern. I mean, Why are ESCOs such an important option for a facility to consider?
Well, when it comes to public buildings, our biggest market, the challenge is that money for public buildings always has some challenge in how they get that money. It has to go through a vote or elected official in some way, shape, or form. And you just don't see that is necessarily a popular thing to support. Many elected officials don't really want to go campaign on improving buildings. They want to talk about staff or improved services or a new park or whatever it happens to be. So there's a challenge in getting money for public buildings to do the renovation. That's partly why this industry was created. It became possible to do renovations in buildings without taking new taxpayer money. And that's a real key to the industry, is that it does these renovations without causing new taxpayer incurring of money spent. So it's taking existing money, and instead of sending it to a utility or to an operational contractor, it's sent back through the ESCO process to build new product.
Is there anybody in here had any questions or anything that they wanted to ask Tim, or had any kind of concerns or anything you wanted to know about the process?
We were walking, and she was like, "You have 5 minutes to picture." I guess I picture.
No, I guess. Well, Tim, I know we're getting close to the end here. If there's anything that we didn't touch on or anything that you maybe wanted to mention that would be important, you think would be pertinent for our group?
Well, I think it's important to know when you're dealing with an ESCO, it's a very strong relationship industry. So today, here in this audience, we have a lot of companies that might want to work with the ESCO and sell their product or service into an ESCO. At the same time, the ESCO then wants to sell that to the client. In the same way that the client has a relationship with the ESCO, and it's a very cordial one, a lot of give and take, it's the same relationship an ESCO asks of those suppliers. They want to have a supplier that's there when you need them, that'll stand behind their product, and be there for a long period of time.
And like you said, what are some of those aspects of the ESCO that the facility manager should be looking at? Those key things that are important to that relationship.
Well, we know when you do a selection process, every state has a certain process you have to go through. But generally, there's always a point where you have an in-person interview, call it an oral interview. And they're short. They're like 15 minutes, sometimes they're 30 minutes. And often it'll be the energy service companies invited in to show their product, show their proposal to a group of people, get a few questions, and then they're out the door. When you do that, I always like the oral interview best as a key piece of the selection process, because you're looking for a group you can gel with, that you can form a relationship with. And that's very, very important, because if you get a company that just for some reason, they seem to want to drive the ship and you want to drive the ship, and those two management styles are not meshing, you're going to have conflicts down the road, because this is a very cooperative process. And if you're having conflicts or disagreements right in the oral interview, which happen, it's clear that they're not the partner for you, because another company will come in and you'll mesh very well with them. And so the key is really to understand that relationship and make sure you don't just go pick somebody because the school district down the road used them. Well, they may have been great for that place down the road because they may have meshed really well, but they may not mesh with you because they're not you. And so it's very important just to understand that and spend some time with them to make sure they have that right pick, because you're going to be spending a lot of time with them, not just in the development and delivery of the project, but over this term of the guarantee.
Yeah, and I know a recent story I wrote was on a 20-year agreement between Warren County Public Schools and their ESCO. I think it was CMTA.
That's right.
And we wrote about that, and they were presented at your conference in Anaheim in November. And take a look at the latest version of BOM magazine. We've got a story in there about the ESCO relationship, and we do cover a lot of it as well on FacilitiesNet. Tim might be a pretty familiar face if you do FacilitiesNet a lot. We work with him a lot on the concept, and he is a very good provider for us. So we really thank you for your time here, Tim,
Yes.
and thanks for everything you do here at the show.
Thanks for having me. Great.